Okay, we're the 25th of May 2023 as I start recording this video. It's probably 7:40 a.m. and I'm having my breakfast, and this is a morning talk video. I will not structure etc, but I intend to talk about virtue signaling. But first, some books that I received recently, because I order books almost every day. One might say that, of course, I do not have the time to read them, but the 100-mile diet, a year of eating local. And since I've started eating local, these are potatoes and onions, eggs, lentilles, and I don't know how you call this, proteins, vegetal proteins. Yeah. Since I've started eating local, I've lost a lot of weight, I've gained in agility. I do not pollute, or I pollute to a minimum because I walk to buy my groceries. I encourage local businesses, which strengthens the local economy. It's better because these are fresh produce. They are not imported or not for very far away, so it reduces pollution. It's better because it's in congruence with the seasons. I eat organic, etc., etc. So this book I can recommend. I haven't read the book, but I've bought the kind of equivalence in French, not the translation, but books like these in French, and I have distributed these books as well. The Global Currency Plot by Mr. Thorsten Polleit. Yeah. Polleit, yeah, okay. That's a book about the central banks. It's from the Mises Institute. I've been reading this book. I will not talk about this here. Also, I received Das Kapital. I have the book in French, of course, but here I wanted to have the German version because it's easier to read German text in German, although Marx was of Jewish origin, he wrote in German. But yeah, I haven't read Marx for a long time, and maybe I will read a little bit because his intellectual legacy has to be partly respected. Not the political influence that he's had, but Marx as an intellectual. I haven't read him in a while, but at least it's worthy of taking into consideration. So maybe I will reread some passages. I read the Kapital when I was 21 probably. Yeah, so I haven't read this for a while. But now I have the mediation of Hegelian categories. Yeah, so I received books about Switzerland from Swiss author Mr. Werner, Post-Democracy, and Mr. Oskar Freysinger, the Swiss remedy. These are excellent. I haven't read these books, but I know they are great modern Swiss intellectuals. And Switzerland is kind of a model, like the US. It's the best approximation to the American ideal that one can find in continental Europe, or maybe probably outside of America. The Swiss, they really are a part for the good. In Europe, they are a mature, grown-up country. I mean, they used to be, they still are, with a citizenry which is not passive, but which is active, which is responsible, and it's really a model. Yeah, the hive mind, how your nation's IQ matters so much more than your own. I haven't read the book yet, but yeah, about IQ on a collective scale. The latest book by Matthew Segall, Crossing the Threshold, is etheric imagination in a post-Kantian process, philosophy Process Philosophy of Schelling and Whitehead. I know it's a great book. I only order great books most of the time. Here, I must say, a French trinity of important young intellectuals, one might say. Monsieur Chaigneau, why he's a communist. An essay on the objectivity of dialectical and historical materialism. He's kind of a respectable Marxist intellectual. I haven't read the book, but I know him vaguely. I mean, I watched some of his videos, and he's kind of respectable. But the problem with intelligent Marxist intellectuals is that they are too good for a lot of people that they claim to defend. Like, these are actually people who are interested in ideas, a coherent worldview, etc. And most of the time, their good ideas are used by manipulators and politicians. It's not always the case, but yeah. So that's a trend in France, that there is a strong Marxist tradition. But here he's one of the most intelligent modern representatives. He's a young person. I think he's in his late 20s. Monsieur Rougeyron, Inquiry about the Law of the 3rd of January 1973. It's about banking and debt in France, and how the elites got hold on French financial institutions. He's an important, relatively young intellectual, probably in his 30s. I would, if I had to classify, it's not sufficient, but I would say pro-sovereignty, social conservative, yeah. And Monsieur Jean Robin, What the World Owes to Protestantism. That's a book about the accomplishment, innovations, inventions, achievements of Protestants. Yeah. So these are three important, very important French rising, young, relatively young intellectuals, Monsieur Rougeyron, Monsieur Chaigneau, and Monsieur Jean Robin. And here, books. It's my document, The Phenomenal Appearance of Mind, about attractiveness. I discovered this book by watching to Paige Layall, an autistic young, I think she's Australian, a young Australian autistic girl. Beauty Pays. So we are discovering why attractive people are more successful. We are discovering, in case it was not self-evident, but that beauty brings a strong competitive advantage in society in terms of influence, money, income, etc., etc. Yeah, so it's scientifically proven. That's why the myth of equality is kind of delusional. And the counterpart, that's a novel that I discovered thanks to Thomas Di Lorenzo in The Problem of Socialism, Facial Justice. That's kind of an egalitarian utopia. It was written, I think, in the 1960s. I haven't read, I neither read this book, but basically that's realistic socio-biological findings, one might say, or sociological and anthropological findings. And here that's the leftist dystopia, the will to equalize people, so that the two people who are too beautiful would not take too much advantage of their beauty. So that this is, I think, the plot of the novel in the tradition of Orwell and Huxley. The English, they have to be praised because they are really lucid and clear-minded and forward-thinking and very intelligent. And here, an Englishman, precisely, Mr. Sean Gabb, who is a libertarian Englishman. So yeah, these are some of the books that I have received recently. Yeah, okay, 10 minutes. So now I can eat my breakfast. About virtue signaling. virtue signaling is a tactic that people use to show off their virtuous intentions or deeds, or to boast about their morality, to gain influence, status and prestige over others, to show to others how good they are, how dedicated, altruistic they are, so that others will trust them, which enables to gain influence and to dominate. So in a way it's kind of a Machiavellian strategy, but it works very well for white people, because that's the tactic that the white leftist uses constantly to claim in public their virtue, their intentions of helping everyone, caring about everyone, the climate, the poor, the disenfranchised, the minorities, the immigrants, the disabled, etc., etc., which enables them to pretend that they are good people and to reap all the rewards, all the benefits of proclaiming virtue without necessarily practicing. So it can be hypocritical. And with mass communication through the internet, we see a lot of people doing this, the virtue signaling, because it's efficient, but also we see the counterpart, namely one might say the cynical, but actually the lucid view that a lot of people do this while without practicing what they proclaim, or without practicing what they preach. So the hypocrisy is being revealed in a way. Of course, not all those who virtue signal are hypocrites. If they really practice virtue, it's okay to publicly show off about this, no problem. But there are a lot of people who virtue signal with the money of others, namely those who use state power, coercion to achieve their virtuous claims. We have to help the women, the migrants, the minorities, whoever. If it's done on a personal level through self-sacrifice in terms of dedication of time, money, resources, that's very good. That's a Christian in a good sense. But if it's done with public money stolen from the taxpayer, you reap all the reward by publicly claiming your virtue, but then the sacrifice is actually a plunder for the taxpayer. So yeah. But I intend to do a little bit of virtue signaling, that virtue, well, decent behavior that I've been practicing consistently, that's important, consistency, and constantly, yeah. Yeah, so first, I do not consume a lot of temptations of the flesh, as they call this, alcohol, cigarettes, junk food, and all this kind of pornography, masturbation, money gambling, television, and all this kind of stuff. I don't do this, and I haven't been doing any of these for probably 12 to 14 months, sometimes more. So I try to reduce the amount of poison which enters my mind, my soul, and my body. That's the first step. Then I have been consistently cleaning the streets between 10 to 13, 30, not 13, 10 to 30 minutes almost each day for probably 7 months. Not each day, but 95% of days, because sometimes I'm really exhausted, and but I've done this with a very high rate of consistency, cleaning the streets, picking up the trash, etc. each day between 10 and 30 minutes. And it enables, if you do this, whoever you are, if you start doing this, you will gain a reputation of being a decent citizen, and you will clean the street, and you, I've already said this, it's a one way of fighting peacefully and ecologically against statism and decadence. Yeah, I have been distributing good books about ecology, prepping, organic diet, books like these, not this book obviously because it's in English, but books like these, to encourage people to change their diet, their behavior, books about the economy, liberal, classical liberal, free market, libertarian books, to help people understand the economy better in periods of inflation, or to understand the laws of economics, basically. I've been distributing books for 7 months, and a lot of books, and I do this, I distribute many books each week with food stamps. I've already said this, but I've kept practicing this. I go in grocery stores, I buy organic supplies, and I distribute a book with a few supplies anonymously, so that any person potentially can get it when it is distributed, to encourage people to change their diet and to help really the poor in periods of inflation. I've been doing this consistently. I've been distributing t-shirts like this one, not exactly this one, but like these, to kind of comical, ecological t-shirts, to encourage people to eat organic food, local food, etc., etc. I've been distributing food, supplies, and books in solidarity associations, churches, or mosques. I'm tolerant in my civic participation. I've distributed basket of supplies with books in various religious places or associations, to encourage people. I do this in grocery stores, but also in religious or civic places. Yeah. I've consistently encouraged, by actively participating in local, small, private businesses, to encourage local life, economic life, and you can do this wherever you find yourself. It's important to encourage local businesses, because the economic independence is the condition of political independence, one might say. Yeah, I have reduced my level of comfort. I have encouraged, and I continue to do so, communication with my immediate environment. Sometimes I make little gifts to people that I encounter, neighbors. I've encouraged communication with family members, one might say. I have distributed papers, documents that I produce myself about home economics, in French obviously, the ones that I talk about in my videos, my series of videos on home economics. I have the printed version with references and books. I've been distributing this to some people, and I intend to continue to do so, to help them see a systematic view of daily life, plus references, books, authors, etc., to help those who are interested. I've made supplies and I continue to do so. Last year, when the war in Ukraine broke out, I quit my bullshit job, and I haven't had any income ever since. So I live without income I've been living without income for almost 15 months now. So I spend my capital that I earned through legacy inheritance and insurance policy due to philosophical experimentation, one might say. So I do not believe in politics, and I do not participate in politics. I do no longer buy the news because I don't believe in the mainstream media. I don't believe in the monetary system. I do not believe in the monetary system, and I know that it can only exist, the mass plundering through inflation, fiat money, paper money, etc., because first, people do not understand, and second, they participate in the plunder, one might say. So I've been reading a lot of books, great books, about economics and finance and the monetary system. Mostly the books by the Mises Institute, to help understand how the central bank, the Fed, the European Central Bank, how they operate and how they distort the economy and indirectly steal the money of the people through inflation. So I've been working very hard to accumulate and gather the knowledge to be able to communicate with ordinary people about this very topic, the economic distortion, one might say. And I try to reduce my economic participation in terms of playing the rigged game, the crooked game, one might say, because people are being plundered. Yeah, I will not talk about the why is that. Ron Paul talks about this, but the financial and monetary system is kind of a scam. People get plundered constantly. The dollar, according to Ron Paul in the book And the Fed, lost 95% of its purchasing power since the creation of the Fed a century ago. So people are being, the value of their assets, either financial or monetary, is being downgraded constantly and subtly in an invisible, one might say, way through the constant creation of debt money. I will not talk again about this because I've been doing this already and I am working on this, but yeah, so when you understand the trick, there's no incentive to accumulate money except really for the basic needs of day-to-day survival, but I am not in need, one might say, because I have a little bit of capital, but the monetary system has to change radically, one might say, and one way is to not participate, to understand how it works, to explain to others how the deception and the manipulation works. Having no income prevents me from paying taxes on income because I make zero money, so I do not pay taxes. I do not believe in politics and I do not believe in statism, one might say. So I try to not influence and strengthen the problem. I try to rebuild, not on my own, but with my own involvement and actions. I do not believe in statism, and I know that the welfare state, which has been implemented over the past decades in the West, is unsustainable. But people, they nonetheless need to be taken care of. So I try on my day-to-day behavior to offer on my singular level an alternative to the services provided by the welfare state. That's why I help the poor by participating in charities, distributing supplies and books, because the state intervention can only grow by sucking the vital life out of civic society, and in order to replace a non-sustainable and unsustainable welfare state, people have to recreate social bonds and social connections and social interactions, solidarity, etc. And I do this weekly, or sometimes daily. But everyone has to, at least those who physically can, everyone has to do a little step. I try to how should I explain this? I've understood that of course, depending on the generation to which people belong, their worldview is completely different, because they haven't had the same upbringing, the same culture, the same economic conditions, the same zeitgeist, I might say. And in the modern West, there is a radical shift of mindset between the older generations and the younger ones. And historically, here I'm not in the mindset of criticizing the boomers, but actually the boomers, the people born in the 50s and 60s, and up until the 70s, I might say, they were, and they still are, the most prosperous, the generation which has enjoyed the most prosperous economic conditions in the entire history of humankind. Western boomers, people born in the couple of decades after the end of the Second World War, they have enjoyed the greatest overall, of course not everyone, but as group, the greatest material prosperity ever enjoyed by any society anywhere. And they grew up in the aftermath of the Second World War, and with hopes of peace and cooperation and equality and the end of all struggles and the end of history, etc., etc. And the world that the later generations, the millennials and I don't know what exactly, Gen Z, etc., the people born in the 1980s, 90s and 2000s, they inherit a world. I'm talking about Western people born in the 80s, 90s and 2000s. They inherit a world which was considered to be in need of overthrow, one might say. The people of 1968, the hippies and the leftists and the cultural revolutionaries, they wanted to get rid of the past, and the later generations of Westerners, they are the result of 3 to 4 decades of attempted self-denial, demographic, cultural, anthropological, moral, religious, economic, decades of radical self-annihilation in a way. And those who still want to live, they have to oppose a suicidal civilization, a dying world. So there is a radical change of perspective depending on really the people who are in their 60s, 70s in the West, and the younger generation in their 20s or 30s, because the model that is being inherited by the younger generations is completely unsustainable. The conditions are completely different. There are tensions due to forced integration of radically diverse groups. The economic conditions are being degraded. There is the return of conflict and war on European soil. There are crimes and violence perpetrated by left-wing, right-wing, and religious extremists, one might say. There is a loss of liberties, a censorship. There is a anthropological decline. I mean, from the perspective of a young Westerners, of course, the Western civilization is completely falling apart, and people have been brainwashed. They have been deprived of their cultural, spiritual tradition. That's the process of reconstruction, of course. But nonetheless, I've realized that really there is a diverging worldview between the older, more or less privileged. Here it's not an accusation. They are not responsible for having lived in a prosperous era, but they are relatively prosperous, and they are the children. Here I'm talking about the boomers. They are the children of idealistic, in the naive sense, and prosperous times, and the latest Westerners, those who are less than 40, one might say, they have grown up, and they have to live in a very more difficult, one might say, a more difficult world, where the conditions which have produced, here that's partly a Marxist analysis, the conditions which has produced the liberal, in the sense of leftist ideology, cosmopolitan leftist ideology, the economic conditions are no longer sustainable, and it's very difficult for the younger generations, and yeah. So but I try to cooperate with older people by participating in charities, because there are people who are old but who are nonetheless in very difficult economic conditions. So yeah, but basically the younger generations, where they are not too much brainwashed, they are aware that the system, the economic, sociological, political system is not sustainable. Yeah. So I have been for more than 7 months I've been consistently, unconsciously, and then more and more consciously worked to repair, to fix, to restore on my singular level, and by encouraging others, civil society. Because if there is no civil society, the state controls everything, but for ideological and economic reason it's inefficient, tyrannical, oppressive, etc. So it's not sustainable anyway. So people have to, younger generations, they have to make an effort to revitalize, restore. Here it's specifically the case in Western countries. In Eastern Europe, it hasn't been as decadent because they were poorer under communism, and they are still relatively poor due to decades of communism. So when a society is poor, people are forced to cooperate. Only an excess of wealth enables people to behave like selfish jerks, one might say. But when the economic conditions are more difficult, people are forced to I wouldn't say re-tribalize, but to re-socialize and reconnect. Yeah, and it requires an effort on the part of each person. And what I've been doing and what I continue to do is do my part on a singular level, try to inspire, to encourage people, really distributing good books with supplies or food stamps for helping the poor to eat better, or simply to help them in times of financial difficulty, but not just to help them on a one-sided aspect, but to help them while encouraging them to improve, to read, to study, etc., etc. Yeah, I've helped people without distinction of origin or affiliations, because it's anonymous, so potentially anyone can get the help. And even in a Christian charity organization, I've discovered this, a lot of people, they are atheists and they help people of all religious affiliations. So these are the Christians. That's really the good aspect about Christianity, but also sometimes a little bit well, the good and the bad of Christianity. The Christians, they are a little bit idealistic in the good and the negative sense, one might say. Yeah, but I theorize. I do not theorize, but I study the theoretical aspect of libertarianism, but also I practice each day for several hours, precisely because in order to have a free society, it requires efforts on the part of the people. Yeah. So that's and then of course I produce my videos for free. There are these kind of ordinary talks which are just improvisation, but I've made, and I continue to do so more structured videos. I intend to keep improving my documents. I work every day to study, to gather knowledge, first to become smarter, but also to improve my ability to communicate. But here, to communicate intelligently, that's, Kant already knew this. To communicate efficiently, one has to master the theoretical aspect, and only a person who has really, an intense knowledge of a topic can then share extensively, that's intensity and extension, in order to communicate clearly and to the broadest extent possible. One has to master the theoretical aspect. Yeah. So yeah. I will not pretend that I'm virtuous, but on my day-to-day behavior, over the past 7 months, I have consistently practiced civic virtue on a day-to-day basis. I'm not sure that it has been very efficient, but now when I speak about virtue signaling and civic participation, it is strengthened by my day-to-day behavior. The person, when you watch this, whoever you are, you don't know what I've been doing on a singular level, but I can tell you that I've been practicing my teachings. These are not teachings, but my libertarian views. I haven't even read this book, but I'm sure that it is full of good ideas, but I do not have the time to read all the good books that I buy. But when I talk about civic virtue, ecological, libertarian virtue, I've been practicing this, and as long as I can reasonably and peacefully continue to have my daily routine of civic participation, I will do so, and I encourage you, whoever you are, to do this as well. Yeah. Yeah. There's a saying in French which says, out of necessity, virtue. Which means sometimes you have to be virtuous. The typical illustration is the guy who is too poor to buy expensive clothes. He will say, fashion, that's frivolity. I'm beyond this. It is an example of out of necessity virtue, namely sometimes you can't do something, so you use this as your advantage for claiming your virtue. Or a person who is not very successful with the ladies, he will say promiscuity, no, I'm virtuous. Yeah, but if you don't get the women because you are not very attractive, not only physically, but it can be economically, charismatically, etc., then you can pretend that you are virtuous, but actually if the reason why you do not sleep with the ladies is because you have no success, it's not really virtue, but so here, of course, the ecological minimalist lifestyle for a lot of people, this is precisely out of necessity virtue. The standards of living, they will decrease and they have to be reduced, so you might as well use this as a means to practice ecological virtue. Yeah, and here I just end with a remark. The debate about ecology, I see through the deception the left historically in the 19th and first half of the 20th century, the goal of the left, the aim, was to raise the standards of living of the masses. They were on the side of the poor to improve their living conditions. Of course, they constantly fail economically. Mises and Hayek know this. The leftist policy, it consistently fails to produce what they want to give to the masses, wealth, prosperity, equality, etc. It consistently fails for inherent structural reasons. So now, in the 21st century, in Western countries, the left, they do not care about the poor. Actually, they haven't cared about the poor for decades and decades. But now they do not promote wealth and better standards of living for the poor, but a reduction of the standards of living in the name of ecology, which enables them to virtue signal and to use the inefficiency and the destructive aspect of their regulatory economic policies, which bring about poverty and decline, economic decline, or at least stagnation or limited improvement, one might say. So they use the failures of their own economic policies to promote and to justify minimalism, degrowth, etc. No, we have to reduce our standards of living, and they use the white bourgeois intellectuals. They guilt the white working class because they say, oh, you are among the privileged, the 10% who owns a lot of the wealth, etc. The left, the white leftists, intellectual white leftists, they use any sort of nonsense to maintain themselves in power, basically. Yeah, it's kind of comical when you understand the trick, but here, on a personal level, I really don't care about wealth as such. I enjoy the economic conditions which enable to have prosperity, because the internet, computers, etc. It's a product of a wealthy society. So in a sense, I'm in favor of capitalism, of course, but on a singular level, my wealth, in a way, these are my books, and books, most of them, they are kind of cheap, and big cars, big housing, nice clothes, champagne, vacation in exotic hotels, etc. I don't really care. I've never really cared. The jewelry, etc. Yeah. Yeah. Because here I will end with inspiring, a little bit demagogic statement. Freedom is that's not how, I cannot make great formulations in English. I said it was something like freedom is beyond any price. Freedom is priceless, because there are things which are not for sale, values like freedom and liberty, something like this. Yeah. Yeah. Well, actually, it's kind of true. Yeah, Ron Paul, he says that you have to cherish liberty over security sometimes, liberty over democracy, and I agree. And I would say liberty over prosperity sometimes. Yeah, you do not have to trade liberty for comfort and prosperity if they are mutually excluding. If you can be prosperous and free, no problem, that's great. Most of the libertarians, they are probably very, relatively wealthy on an individual level, but they fight for freedom and they still live in a relatively free country. But if more prosperity leads to less freedom, then you have to choose freedom over prosperity. On the left, they are willing to trade all their civic, political liberties for promises of economic and material wealth, which never comes for inherent structural reasons. So yeah. That was about virtue signaling. Now I will practice a little bit of virtue. I will distribute probably a book, pick up a few trash. Yeah. And also, when I pick up my trash in the streets, usually I wear t-shirts with messages, either ecological or libertarian t-shirts. I'm not sure that people understand them because it's in English most of the time, but if you wear ecological t-shirts and you publicly show off your virtuous behavior by cleaning the streets, etc., you will gain influence indirectly, prestige, and it's a way of sharing ideas. If you clean the streets with a Ron Paul t-shirt or an ecological t-shirt, that which I have been doing, that's how do you call this? Positive image, etc., yeah. Do not ask what the planet can do for you, but ask what you can do for the planet. No, actually, no, I disagree, because for philosophical reasons, mind has preeminence over nature. Yeah, but here I will not talk about ecology, but basically a lot of political ecologists, they are really philosophically illiterate because they worship the planet, the climate, nature, etc. But the planet without healthy, here healthy means partly physiologically but also psychologically and intellectually, the planet without humans to interact on the planet, it's kind of useless. Here I'm anthropocentric, because these are humans who bring value. That's human action, subjective value, etc. How should I explain this? All the values, they are the product of human beings. Beauty, love. Here it means not romantic love, but love between members of the same community. In the case of ecologists, solidarity, warmth in terms of not global warming, but the warming of the heart of people who interact and harmoniously live together. So warmth, love, the beauty of nature, the important values, admiration, respect, honor, courage, etc., etc. These values, they are brought forth by human beings. Yeah. The preservation of the species, it's important for the ecosystem, but it's also deeply motivated by simply a love of beauty. Yeah, which is the product of human valuation. Yeah. Yeah. Here, I will conclude with a right-wing remark. In a way, I've always been an ecologist, and a lot of right-wingers, not the establishment right-wingers, but genuine right-wingers, they are ecologists for aesthetic reasons, because modernity, in a lot of areas, is really ugly. The urbanization is very ugly in a lot of places. So I know, and it has been my case for more than 10 years, I might say. There are a lot of people who have an aesthetic love for nature, as they call this, and they are ecologically minded, unconsciously or consciously, because of an aesthetic revolt. Yeah. Ecology and aesthetics, they have to be not reconciled, because in my view they have always gone, they go hand in hand, but someone like Matthew Segall, that's aesthetic and ecology and German philosophy. Yeah, he's really a great philosopher, and I'm proud to have discovered him. And I do not have the time to translate his books as of now, but maybe I will, because but the problem is that these are books for philosophers. But he's one of the best formal philosophers in the US, but in the world at large. And yeah, that's really a great philosopher. Yeah. So I will end the video here. Ecology, libertarianism, philosophy and aesthetics.